There are moments in a person's life that the entire world seems to watch. Moments where the noise becomes deafening, where the weight of public opinion feels like it could crush everything you have ever built. Most people never have to face those moments in front of millions, but some people do. And what they choose to do in the silence that follows those moments, that is where the real story begins. This is a story about one of the most famous artists in the world, a woman who, at the height of her success, faced a level of public criticism, mockery, and personal heartbreak that would have silenced most people permanently. A woman who was told in countless ways that perhaps she had reached her limit, that perhaps the world had made up its mind about who she was. She did not retreat, she did not disappear, she rebuilt. And what came next was not just a career revival. It was one of the most remarkable personal transformations the entertainment world has ever witnessed. This is the story of Taylor Swift. Taylor Allison Swift was born on December 13, 1989, in West Reading, Pennsylvania. From the very beginning, she was drawn to performance. She studied musical theater, performed in local productions, and spent her childhood understanding something most people take years to learn: that storytelling is the most powerful form of human connection. Her family recognized her passion early. At the age of 14, her parents made a decision that would change everything. They relocated the family to Nashville, Tennessee, so that Taylor could pursue her dream of becoming a country music artist. That kind of parental sacrifice, uprooting an entire life for a child's ambition, says something important about who Taylor Swift was even before the world knew her name. She was someone who inspired belief. In Nashville, she worked relentlessly. She wrote songs as a teenager that reflected emotions and experiences far beyond her years. She signed with Big Machine Records and began crafting what would become her debut album. Every lyric she wrote carried personal truth. Every melody felt lived in. At an age when most young people are still figuring out who they are, Taylor Swift was already communicating the depths of human emotion through music. Her debut album, released in 2006, introduced the world to a teenage girl with a guitar and a gift for language that was rare and undeniable. It was the beginning of something that nobody could have fully predicted. The success that followed was extraordinary by any measure. Album after album, Taylor Swift demonstrated an ability to evolve that kept her audiences both loyal and endlessly curious. From country to pop, from acoustic intimacy to stadium anthems, she did not simply follow trends, she created them. By the early 2010s, she was one of the best-selling music artists in the world. She was collecting Grammy Awards, breaking sales records, and selling out arenas on multiple continents. Critics praised her songwriting. Fans connected with her music in deeply personal ways because she wrote about things that felt universal: first love, heartbreak, friendship, and the complicated experience of growing up in public. She became one of the rare artists who could speak to a teenager in a small town and to a 40-year-old professional in a major city at exactly the same time. That kind of reach is not manufactured. It is earned through honesty. And yet, with that level of fame came something else, something darker. The scrutiny intensified. Her relationships became tabloid stories. Her friendships became narratives. Every public appearance was dissected. Every statement was analyzed. Fame at that scale is both a gift and a relentless pressure. And Taylor Swift was learning that lesson in real time, in front of the entire world. Then came a period that would test not only her career, but her sense of self. The year 2016 became a defining moment, not because of her music, but because of a public conflict that erupted around her image. Without going into accusations or assigning blame, what unfolded was a sustained and very public campaign that questioned her honesty, mocked her character, and invited millions of people to form negative opinions about who she was as a person. Social media became a space where she was ridiculed. The hashtag that trended internationally was one of the most publicly humiliating things any celebrity had faced in the digital era. People who had never met her felt entitled to define her. Voices that were loud and influential shaped a narrative that painted her in the harshest possible light. She had also experienced the end of significant relationships during this chapter of her life, relationships that played out partially in public, adding emotional weight to an already difficult time. The combination of personal heartbreak and public criticism created a moment that for many people would have felt unsurvivable. She later described this period in interviews as one where she genuinely felt she could not go outside, where her reputation, a word she would later reclaim with extraordinary power, felt like it had been decided for her. Think about what that means. One of the most successful artists in the world, at the peak of her career, feeling like she had no ground left to stand on. That is not a small thing. That is the kind of darkness that changes people. The question was, what kind of change would it be? Here is where most stories lose their depth. It is easy to say that someone decided to fight back. It is much more honest to say that the process of rebuilding is rarely a single dramatic decision. It is quiet, it is painful, it is made up of small choices that accumulate into something extraordinary. Taylor Swift retreated from public life in a way that felt, to some observers, like a defeat. She went quiet on social media. She was rarely photographed. She appeared to step back from the persona that had defined her public image for a decade. But she was not retreating, she was working. She was writing, she was processing. She was doing what she had always done when life became difficult. She was turning her experience into art. And this time, the art would be the most honest, the most confrontational, and ultimately the most powerful work she had ever created. Because sometimes the strongest answer to heartbreak is not revenge, but growth. In August 2017, something shifted. Taylor Swift deleted every post from her social media accounts. Her profiles went completely dark. No explanation, no announcement, just silence. The rollout of the Reputation theme. The era was unlike anything she had ever done before. Gone was the sunny, approachable image. In its place was something darker, more complex, and entirely intentional. The album, released in November 2017, addressed the public narrative directly and unapologetically. It was not a victim's record. It was a survivor's record. It was the sound of someone who had decided that if the world was going to define her, she would write the definition herself. Reputation sold over 1 million copies in its first week in the United States alone. The Reputation Stadium Tour became the highest-grossing tour in American history at the time. She did not just return. She returned at a scale that silenced the narrative that had tried to diminish her. But the comeback did not end with Reputation. That was only the beginning of a transformation that would reveal layers of Taylor Swift the public had never seen before. Lover, released in 2019, showed a different side of her, joyful, romantic, and creatively free. It was followed by what many critics consider the most artistically significant work of her career. In 2020, in the midst of a global pandemic, she released Folklore, a quiet, literary album recorded in secret that introduced the world to a songwriter operating at a level that earned universal critical praise. It won the Grammy Award for Album of the Year, making Taylor Swift the first artist in history to win that award 3 times. She then released Evermore just months later, cementing a creative period that felt almost miraculous in its depth and productivity. And then came something that no one expected. The story of her master recordings, her first 6 albums, becoming the subject of a very public and painful dispute. Rather than accept defeat, she announced that she would re-record every one of those albums, reclaiming her music on her own terms. The Taylor's version releases became cultural events. Fans chose to stream the re-recorded versions deliberately, actively participating in her reclamation of her own artistic legacy. True identity is revealed when a person chooses to rebuild instead of retreat. 2023, Taylor Swift announced the Eras Tour, a celebration of every chapter of her musical career. What followed was not simply a concert tour, it became a global cultural phenomenon. Time magazine named her Person of the Year for 2023, the first time a solo musician had received that recognition. She was no longer just a pop star. She was a cultural force, an economic force, a symbol of what is possible when a person refuses to allow their identity to be decided by external voices. The woman who had been publicly mocked, whose reputation had been the subject of international ridicule, was now being studied by economists, celebrated by world leaders, and credited with reinvigorating interest in the music industry at a time when it desperately needed it. Success after adversity often speaks louder than any argument. What Taylor Swift's journey demonstrates is something that goes far beyond the music industry. It is a lesson about the relationship between public perception and personal truth. She was told implicitly and explicitly that the narrative had been written, that the world had made up its mind, that the version of her that existed in trending hashtags and tabloid headlines was the real version, and that she should accept that. She refused. Not loudly at first, not with press conferences or public arguments. She refused quietly, privately, through work, through creativity, through the patient, disciplined act of continuing to build something that mattered. She also used her platform with increasing intentionality. She has spoken publicly about body image struggles, about the pressures facing young women in the entertainment industry, about the importance of artists owning their creative work. She has encouraged civic engagement and voter registration in ways that moved measurable numbers of young people to participate in the democratic process. She has been a philanthropist, supporting food banks, education initiatives, and disaster relief efforts without making those contributions the centerpiece of her public image. She became, in ways she perhaps never planned, a model of resilience for millions of people who had nothing to do with the music industry, but who recognized in her story something familiar: the experience of being defined by others and the quiet daily work of defining yourself. There is something deeply human about Taylor Swift's story that transcends celebrity. We live in a world where public opinion moves at the speed of a share button, where a moment, real or misrepresented, can be taken and shaped into a narrative that follows a person for years, where the loudest voices often have the least information, and where the temptation when those voices turn against you is to become someone smaller, to apologize for things that do not require apology, to retreat into a version of yourself that others find more comfortable. Taylor Swift did not do that, and the cost of not doing it was real. There were years of genuine difficulty, years of navigating a public image that felt hostile, of carrying personal heartbreak through a spotlight she could not turn off. But she carried it, and she transformed it. She turned pain into folklore. She turned conflict into reputation. She turned the theft of her work into a years-long creative reclamation project that changed the conversation about artist rights. She turned the question of who she really was into one of the most successful concert tours in human history, where night after night, hundreds of thousands of people showed up to celebrate every chapter of a life that had been tested and survived. That is not an accident. That is not luck. That is the result of a person who, in the quietest and darkest moments, made a decision to keep going. There is a version of this story that ends differently. There is a version where the criticism wins, where the noise becomes the truth, where a person disappears into the gap between who they are and who others decided they were. That version did not happen. Instead, what happened was this: a young woman from Pennsylvania who moved to Nashville as a teenager with a dream and a notebook full of songs grew into one of the most enduring, most powerful, and most influential artists of her generation, not despite everything that happened to her, in some ways because of it. Because the fire that was meant to diminish her became the fire she used to build something that cannot be burned. If there is one thing Taylor Swift's story leaves us with, it is this: your identity is not what happens to you. Your identity is what you choose to build after it happens. The world may write the first line of your story, but you hold the pen for everything that comes after. And sometimes that everything becomes the most important chapter of all.